So, hello and welcome to my talk about secure input and output handling. It's really exciting to be here on stage. This is a really awesome venue, and it's also my first time in Manchester. So, the subtitle of my talk is How Not to Suck at Data Validation and Output. I think that's a thing every one of us deals with daily, like handling data, getting data from somewhere, pushing it to somewhere else, storing it somewhere. Just a few words about me for those who don't know me. My name is Anna. I'm from Austria. I work at economics as a lead Magento developer. I love IT security and actually information security. So IT security is a part of information security. And I've been around and working with Magento for quite a while now. So what my talk is going to be about is cross-site scripting. We'll just do a quick overview. And then, of course, the input handling, output handling, and front-end input validation, back-end validation, and output handling. So before we start, and I'll tell you a short story, I'd like to make a confession. Actually, I'd like to make all of you a confession. Who has ever just taken data from somewhere, from any kind of input, and stored it blindly in the database without validating it? Yes. So, thank God I'm not the only one. Once upon a time, there was a little customer attribute. And this little customer attribute was called academic title. And it was just meant to store and hold the academic title of a customer when he signs up. So nothing exciting, actually. It was added as a text input field. So there are like 80 academic titles you can have in Austria, quite a lot. And it's sometimes pretty hard to make a list of all those academic titles. So they just went to add a text field. And this is kind of what we expected. So we expected titles like engineer or PhD, Master of Science, all this kind of stuff. And this is what we got. So these are obviously not academic titles. We found out about this when we ran a customer export once, and I just scanned through all the customers and found some really weird entries in there. And yeah, I mean, that's just, crazy. Nothing that is considered an academic title. So we were lucky in this case because there was just only random text. There was no code in there, there was no XSS, but XSS, like cross-site scripting, is real. Just a few words on cross-site scripting. I guess you all know this basic thing where you just pass a variable via get or post through some script. And of course, you can also extend this and add some fancy input in there. A quick definition of cross-site scripting. So Max talked about this also before. It's about just taking input from an untrusted source and store it in your database. And you can have even more fun if you don't escape it on output, and these scripts get executed for another customer, for example. About 65% of all web application projects are considered to suffer from cross-site scripting. There are some statistics that say there is even 80%. Somewhere between 40 and 80% will be, I guess, the truth. It's even number 3 in the OWASP top 10 list of web application security faults, so this is really something to deal with. And I guess there are some easy methods how you can prevent it. Also, this is also one of the reasons why you should always keep your Magento installations up to date, or at least apply the patches. This was the previous patch, the 7.405, which had 21 vulnerabilities, and 7 out of them were cross-site scripting. And also in the latest one, there were 4 cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. So there is some kind of rule that says every feature adds a risk, and for this talk I'd like to extend this to every input-output adds a risk. I guess most of you have seen this before when you did your studies at engineering school, for example. this is a basic thing we deal with every day. So we get an input from somewhere, we process it, we modify it, and then we output it again. This is an alternative view of input, process, and output. This is borrowed from Math's website. This is a function machine. So you have an input on the left, then there is some kind of magic happening, and then there's the output on the bottom right. This could be, for example, a function that multiplies something. But this could also be, if you consider this as your Magento installation, you get an email address and your password from somewhere, then some Magento stuff happens, and then in the end you have a logged in or not logged in customer. And here is, of course, the data which you get, the email address, which you expect to be in an email format. I'd also like to talk about this slide because I just like to reuse it. I think it's still up to date. This one is really old. This is actually older than most of us. This is how technology involves or actually features do. Like there is hardware. Internet of Things is a good example where we have a lot of fancy toys to play with. Then there is software to control those devices, but security is always kind of on the bottom of this line. This graph is from 1980, by the way, but I think it's still relevant. So what I'm just basically saying is stop this last minute security. I know how it works. Like you have 8 hours to finish a feature, and then you already used 10 or 12 to get it done, and everyone says, yeah, we'll make it secure afterwards. I know that this is not going to happen. Secure coding doesn't really take longer if you know where to take care and what functions to use. And also, as you've seen before with the academic titles, I think software quality, data quality, and security are also kind of related. So you know what kind of input you expect at some point, and you can improve the quality of your projects if you also define this. Always keep security in mind. So Fabrizio just had a similar slide. There is this weakest point in your application. You can have a fancy, very secure server setup, but you can screw up your Magento installation with a crappy module or with just one crappy input field. So let's talk about input and input validation. I'm not a user experience expert, not at all, but I think if you add some front-end validation to your forms, where, for example, a field turns green when the format is correct of a telephone number or an email address, this helps the user. So you can stop the input that you don't want to have at this point when it occurs. You don't need to bother your server with crazy input. Because you can validate it front-end side already first, and don't fill up your database with garbage that you don't expect. Magento has a set to help us with this. So there is the validation.js in Magento 1, and there is this rules.js in Magento 2. We'll just have a quick look on your new friend, rules.js, which provides a lot of cool validator methods, like validating for min text and max text length, required entry, I guess most of you have used before, and so on. I'm sorry for the slide. There are like a lot of those validation rules which you can use in Magento 2, but I just had to edit so you can see what's in there. You can validate for streets and zip codes, and there's already a lot that you can use right out of the box. But it's also not hard to add your own validator if you need it for a certain field. So in this case, here is a validation for a custom name where everything that's not Anna is not a valid name. So you can just easily extend it for your own needs, and I'm not a JavaScript guy, just backend, Vitaly might like it, but this is not hard. In the front end, it's easy to add. Just use this data validate attribute and add your validators here. So this is a bonus information. Don't remove this error required because this is necessary for screen readers. So why is front-end input validation not enough? Sorry for the example. This is from a German website. There was a Coca-Cola website where they had this feature to add your own name on the bottle. So I could order a bottle with, drink a Coke with Anna, for example. And they had a blacklist, of course, of words which they didn't want to have on their bottles. For example, sugar, drink your Coke with sugar. Not so good. Pepsi. This says, drink your Coke with Pepsi. And there was a guy who actually was able to order a bottle with drink a Coke with Pepsi because he just modified the post request. So they checked it on the front end, but they didn't check it on the back end. Yeah. Well done. So don't trust your users. They will send you crazy stuff, but don't trust the input at all, because there is not just user input where you can get data from. There are also web services, and there are cookies that can be modified. You have database query results, also server variables. So there is a lot of stuff that can be wrong. So let's talk about backend validation. In Magento 1 and 2, you have this abstract data class. So for all EAV attributes, you can use already alphanumeric, numeric, alpha, email, URL, and date, which is there. But as we know, Magento comes with Zen Framework. There are also a lot of nice Zen Framework validators, which you can use just because the library is already there. So there is alphanumeric validators, credit card validators, dates, and so on. So if you add a new attribute, just have a look what from all these given validators you can use. Output. Is input validation not enough because we checked it on the front end and then on the back end again? No, it's not enough. I'd like to talk about Magento 2 templates cross-site scripting security. There is actually a nice a page on the DevDocs where it is explained which methods you should use for escaping output. So there are those get whatever HTML methods. So if there is a get title HTML method, or if the function contains HTML, you can use it and you don't have to escape it furthermore. Then everything that is typecasted, like casted to an integer or count, doesn't need additional escaping. If there is output in single or double quotes, this doesn't need further escaping. And there are also specific escape functions, like escape cross-site scripting in URL. Yeah, that's it. So those are the three functions used for escaping in Magento 2, which I'd like to talk about quickly. So the most important one is escape HTML. So this is just used to output any string that should not contain HTML. It's defined in the Magento framework escaper, and as you can see, there is also an additional attribute for allowed tags, which won't be escaped in this case. And internally, it uses HTML special characters. And what is really interesting here is this UTF-8, because you should also take care about encoding. You can do a lot of fancy stuff with several encodings, mixing encodings, UTF-8, UTF-7, ISO 8859.2, and so on. So make sure all your data uses UTF-8. Then there is escape XSS in URL, which basically is internally called from escape URL. So actually it's clever to use escape URL, but can someone send me a reminder that I make a pull request for the DevDocs? Actually, it should be escape URL and not escape cross-site scripting in URL. And there is also escape quotes, just for escaping quotes inside HTML attributes. So I opened the DevDocs page like 2 weeks ago, and I saw a little note. I saw a little note there that there will be updates to those escape functions in Magento 2.2. So have a look as soon as Magento 2.2 is out, what will be changed in there. Actually, I don't know what will be new then. Also a few words about testing. So Magento 2 comes with a lot of tests, and there is actually a test for static cross-site scripting. In here, it's also described in the dev docs page, and it's just as easy as run the static test with dev tests run static. So in here, there is this XSS PHTML template test, and then you get a list of where not escaped output is found. So I recommend you run this test regularly during development and just fix it right away. So you want to know what happened to our little customer attribute as soon as we cleaned up the database. We removed those weird customer entries. We added a front-end validation in this case, a drop-down, for example. Whitelist would have been an option too, but as I told you before with the example from Coke, also do back-end validation, and we escaped output at this point. So the summary of the talk is just think and act and design your software responsibly whenever you're working with attributes and any kind of input. Think about client-side front-end validation. Think about the server-side validation. As I said, think about the encoding. Make sure you use UTF-8 all the way. Escape the data at the point of use. This is mostly your website, but this can also be kind of an export. And use the tests. So, thank you. That's it. Any questions? Where?
Up there.
Hello.
Oh.
Do you run any particular software in sort of sandbox environments, pen testing or anything like that, to try and see if you've missed anything while you've been developing? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Actually, as of now, I don't run any pen testing tools on Magento because usually, well, you can find your own mistakes, but Magento is also tested with the same tools, so yeah. So I found this static test really useful.
Yeah.
But actually, you won't find those design mistakes with those tools, right? Yeah. Because I think that's a part of your thinking and adjusting your thinking to what data you expect at some point. So no tool will find this. They will find if I forget to use one of these functions, but yeah, they won't find the rest. Okay, I think then it's time for lunch break. Oh, not lunch break, break.